Welcome back, history buffs, to AP History Help. Today, we're diving into Unit 5, a whirlwind period from 1844 to 1877. This era covers some of the most defining moments in American history, from Manifest Destiny to the Civil War and Reconstruction. We'll explore westward expansion, sectional tensions, key battles, and the enormous social and political changes that reshaped the nation. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP History classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, or AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and show notes to find the topics that you need help with. AP History Help is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, where I am happy to answer your questions. Come on in, students. It's time for class. Let's start with some context. In this unit, we see the United States expanding its territory, grappling with the moral and economic conflicts surrounding slavery, fighting a brutal civil war, and trying to piece the country back together during Reconstruction. Think of this as a story of ambition, conflict, and transformation, one that sets the stage for modern America. Grab your notebooks or those student success planners, because we're about to start a war. But don't worry, we'll end it too. Unit 5 is heavy with causation, and we'll look at the events that led to the start of the Civil War and the consequences thereof. Let's begin with Manifest Destiny, the belief that the U.S. was destined to expand its territory across the North American continent. By the 1840s, Americans were moving westward in droves, motivated by economic opportunities, religious motivations, and the idea that expansion was their God-given right. President James K. Polk was a major champion of Manifest Destiny. His administration oversaw significant land acquisitions, including the annexation of Texas, the Oregon Territory, and lands acquired after the Mexican-American War. Let's break this down. After gaining independence from Mexico, Texas joined the U.S. in 1844, sparking tensions with Mexico. This was a key step in fulfilling Manifest Destiny, but also set the stage for war. The slogan, 54-40 or fight, reflected American claims to the Oregon Territory. Polk negotiated a treaty with Britain in 1846, securing land that would become the Pacific Northwest. The Mexican-American War, fought from 1846 to 1848, was sparked by disputes over Texas and resulted in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The United States gained a massive amount of territory, including present-day California, Arizona, and New Mexico, but at a cost: heightened tensions over whether new states would permit slavery. Here's a question to consider. How did Manifest Destiny shape America's identity and create conflicts that would later explode into the Civil War? Think about the economic opportunities that expansion offered versus the political and moral dilemmas it created. As the U.S. expanded, so did debates over slavery. As a matter of fact, following the Mexican-American War, the issue of slavery in the territories became the key cause of sectional tension. The Free Soil Party formed in 1848. Their logo was Free Soil, Free Labor, and Free Men. And Free Soilers wanted no slavery in new land to the West. They weren't against slavery in the South. Instead, their goal was to ensure the West was an opportunity for whites only. Many Southerners saw any attempt to restrict the expansion of slavery as a violation of their constitutional rights. The Whig Party took no position on slavery in the election of 1848 when Zachary Taylor defeated the Democratic candidate. The Democrats supported popular sovereignty, allowing the people in the territories to decide the issue of slavery for themselves. Then, in 1849, the gold rush began in California, and before asking to be admitted to the United States, they created a constitution banning slavery. This was a problem because it would upset the balance of free and slave states in the Senate. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to maintain balance by admitting California as a free state, setting up Utah and New Mexico territories that would vote on slavery, while strengthening the Fugitive Slave Act. This had been law, but seldom enforced. Now it would be enforced that any fugitive slaves in free territory had to be returned by law, and it turned the North into a hunting ground for fugitive slaves. Northerners who assisted runaways could be arrested. Slaves could not testify in court and were denied a jury trial. The slave trade was banned in Washington, D.C., but it didn't take long for tensions to escalate. Sectional tensions were further strained in 1852 when Harriet Beecher Stowe published her heart-wrenching novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Dismayed by the passage of the Fugitive Slave Law, she was determined to awaken the North to the wickedness of slavery by laying bare its terrible inhumanity, especially the cruel splitting of families. The success of the novel, both in the United States and abroad, was unprecedented, but it was also put on stage in many places. No other novel in American history can be compared with it as a political force. To many people, it made slavery appear almost as evil as it really was. The South condemned it, saying there were untruths. People in the North who read it said they would never take part in enforcing the fugitive slave law. Southerners, especially those with money, became more convinced that Northerners would abolish slavery and the way of life based upon it as soon as they could. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealed the Missouri Compromise and introduced popular sovereignty to the Kansas and Nebraska territories, letting them decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. The result? Violence in what was called Bleeding Kansas, as pro- and anti-slavery forces clashed. This was seen as a foreshadowing of the Civil War. Further, the Dred Scott decision in 1857 was a Supreme Court ruling that declared that African Americans were not citizens and that Congress couldn't prohibit slavery in the territories. It enraged abolitionists and further widened the sectional divide. Amid these tensions, new political movements emerged. The Republican Party formed in the 1850s, uniting anti-slavery activists and others opposed to the spread of slavery. Abraham Lincoln's leadership in this party would soon prove pivotal. He emerged on the national stage when he ran for U.S. Senate against Stephen Douglas in 1858. They debated each other 7 times, and while Lincoln would lose, he would become known for taking a stance on the moral iniquity of slavery, and he attacked popular sovereignty for the bloody results it produced in Kansas. The two would debate again in 1860, when both would run for president. The 1860 presidential election was a turning point. Abraham Lincoln's victory signaled to Southern states that their way of life, heavily reliant on slavery, was under threat. South Carolina seceded from the Union, followed by several other Southern states forming the Confederacy. Ask yourself, why did Lincoln's election spark such a dramatic reaction? Was it about slavery, states' rights, or something deeper about the South's economic and cultural identity? These are key questions for understanding the causes of the Civil War. The Civil War began in 1861, and it was the deadliest conflict in U.S. history. Let's highlight some major events. Fort Sumter was where the war's opening shots were fired, rallying the North and solidifying Southern resolve. When Lincoln was inaugurated in March of 1861, he swore to uphold the Constitution, but then he tore a few holes in that document. He concluded that if he did not do so, that there might not be a Constitution or a United States to mend. Lincoln knew that doing this was not going to continue once the Union was preserved. Congress was not in session when the war started, so Lincoln gathered the reins into his own hands. Brushing aside legal objections, he boldly proclaimed a blockade. He increased the size of the federal army, which is something that only Congress can do under the Constitution. He directed the Secretary of the Treasury to advance $2 million without appropriation or security to private citizens for military purposes. He also suspended the precious privilege of the writ of habeas corpus so that anti-unionists might be summarily arrested. In taking this step, he defied a ruling by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that safeguards of habeas corpus could be set aside only by the authorization of Congress. Lincoln's regime was guilty of many other high-handed acts. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. He declared all slaves in Confederate states free. Now, while it didn't immediately free all enslaved people, it reframed the war as a fight against slavery and discouraged foreign nations from supporting the Confederacy. The Battle of Gettysburg in 1863 was a turning point as it halted Confederate advances into the North and dissuaded Britain from helping the South. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address redefined the war's purpose as a struggle for a new birth of freedom. Sherman's March to the Sea in 1864 was a campaign that devastated the South's infrastructure, demoralizing its population and hastening the war's end. The Union's advantage in industry, population, and resources ultimately secured victory in 1865, but at tremendous cost. Over 600,000 lives were lost. After the war, the U.S. faced the enormous task of rebuilding the South and integrating formerly enslaved people into society. The Reconstruction era lasted from 1865 to 1877 and saw both progress and setbacks. 3 Reconstruction Amendments were passed, and Southern states had to ratify them as they re-entered the Union. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery nationwide. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship to anyone born in the U.S. and promised equal protection under the law. And the 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. Despite these achievements, Reconstruction faced fierce resistance. The South implemented black codes to restrict the rights of African Americans, and groups like the Ku Klux Klan used violence and intimidation to maintain white supremacy. The system of sharecropping also kept many African Americans in conditions similar to slavery. By 1877, Reconstruction ended as federal troops withdrew from the South, effectively abandoning efforts to ensure racial equality. This failure would have long-lasting consequences, contributing to systemic racism and inequality that persisted for generations. Let's tie all of this together. Unit 5 is about growth, of territory, of political movements, and of social change, but also about conflict. Manifest Destiny expanded America's borders but deepened sectional tensions. Debates over slavery escalated into war. The Civil War resolved the question of secession and slavery, but left lingering racial and regional divides. Reconstruction made significant progress but fell short of its goals, leaving unresolved challenges for the future. As you study this unit, focus on causation and change over time. How did Manifest Destiny lead to war? How did the Civil War reshape the nation's laws and identity? And how did Reconstruction's successes and failures set the stage for future struggles for equality? And that's a wrap on Unit 5. The podcast is going to take a little time off for winter break. The next episode, releasing on January 13th, will cover Unit 6 of AP World History, the Age of Imperialism, and the Consequences of Industrialization. Then on January 27, look for Unit 6 of APUSH, 1865 to 1898, American Expansion, the Gilded Age, and Immigration. Don't forget to grab a Student Success Planner to help prepare you for the exam. It's not too soon to be thinking about that. And be sure to always be reviewing your notes. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram for quick tips, and check out my website, aphistoryhelp.com, for more resources and information on how to get in contact with me. And that will do it for this episode. Don't forget to come back to Wendy for AP History Help. This episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history.